Joining me now is Sky News host Liz Storer. Liz, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy New Year. Here we go again. Now, look, I want to start our chat. I spoke earlier about the con job that is Welcome to Country ceremonies. We've now found out that almost $500,000 has been spent by government departments in the last 2 years.
We are funding this.
This is a problem. You and I are paying for it. We at home, we're all paying for this. It's a con job. It's a business transaction.
Well, what this is now is a class war, Danica. Like, out and out, just a class war. Because especially after the referendum last year, we all know what the vast majority of Australians think about this. We voted no to all this divisive nonsense that actually means nothing and doesn't help anyone get ahead in life. So what we have now are the elites, the leaders, whatever you want to call them, whether it's in the corporate world, the sporting bodies, or our own governments, whether it's local, state or federal, forcing this down our throats regardless. So this is out and out a class war. And what I have been doing, and I encourage anybody else to join me, is letting out a small boo. Because like you, I flew to Perth and I had a stopover in Melbourne. So I had several different landings across the course of my holidays. And I just let out an audible groan or a small little boo, nothing too, you know.
Well, you didn't get a megaphone and announce it.
No, but it's like a ugh or a boo. And all I get are smiles because what I want people to start doing now is do something about it because we are the majority here. These elites, we outnumber them hundreds of thousands to one. We said no, they've ignored us. And so if you're not the audible kind of person, send an email to the person who organised the event that you attended. Whatever it is, take some action because until these guys get enough pushback, as per the footy, which you showed a clip earlier in the show, people were just audibly booing, saying, we are not taking this anymore. We need to make it so people just drop this off their agendas for their meetings, their sporting arrangements, because they know it's wildly unpopular and it's actually become embarrassing because the people have been so audible about saying, we don't like this. We don't want this. You guys are virtue signalling. We're not on board. And it's an entire nonsense.
I completely agree. And I almost feel like the tide is turning. You've got Melbourne Storm. You've got elders up in North Queensland saying it's now being abused. If they're saying it, then the rest of us should be listening to it. So, no, I completely agree with you. But look, let's move on because Australian Open champion Novak Djokovic has revealed he suffers traumatic experiences whenever he returns to Melbourne after being detained by Australian Border Force officers and eventually deported, you'll remember, over his refusal to reveal his COVID vaccine status 3 years ago. Now, he says he has mixed feelings about the Victorian capital, which, of course, became the lockdown capital of the world after the way he was treated back in 2022. Liz, I don't blame him. He went through an absolute saga and a half with the Victorian government.
And I love that he's still raising this because lest we forget, this man did nothing wrong. He had a visa. He was granted a visa. He had as many as 3 sporting bodies say, yes, this man can come. They were all fully aware that he was unvaccinated at the time. He put up his hand and said, look, I'm more than happy to be tested on the hour if that's going to give you peace of mind. I don't mind that whatsoever. And this guy was treated like a criminal on Australian soil after he'd done absolutely nothing wrong. And our government's excuse for doing so, I'm paraphrasing here, but I remember watching online the court case that ensued as these guys in wigs were battling this out. And I was hoping against hope that we'd see sanity prevail. Our government was worried that because this man was a champion of those of us who refused to be denied bodily autonomy during that terrible period in our nation's history, that he would inspire others to do the same. That's what it came down to. They were the thought police and they wanted to kick him out of the country. They successfully did so, which I think bit them in the backside because more people were inspired by that, seeing this man persecuted for doing nothing more than saying, hey, I'm one of the most elite athletes in the world. I'm not taking this thing for my own reasons. He wasn't getting on a pedestal and encouraging others to do the same. He was simply taking a stand for himself. They couldn't stomach it.
No.
And so no wonder he's like, man, I get traumatic flashbacks because I was kicked out of the country just because the government didn't like what I chose to do with my own body.
No, he was treated like a criminal, you're right. And, you know, all these years later, nobody bats an eyelid anymore over your vaccination status.
Oh, yeah. In fact,
this is a thing.
The following year, the Australian Open allowed COVID positive players to play.
There you go.
They just said, look, if you're feeling well enough, it doesn't matter that you've tested positive. Go for it, mate.
For
You're on the court.
It's just such double standards. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, look, a Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist has resigned from the Washington Post after the newspaper refused to publish her satirical sketch. Anne Telenay's cartoon depicted the American publication's billionaire owner Jeff Bezos kneeling before Donald Trump, offering the president-elect a bag of cash. Liz, I don't like this. I am an advocate for freedom of the press. This goes, in my opinion, completely against it.
Well, I don't believe in freedom of the press. I think it's a great idea. But the truth of the matter is every single media outlet is owned and operated by people who have biases. And who wouldn't, you and I included,
of course,
if we had that kind of say, we'd be like, well, we're not platforming certain things that we want highlighted, and we're going to highlight things that we do want highlighted. And in many ways, it still works, because if you're a lefty, you read The Guardian and you watch the ABC, and if you're of my persuasion, you'll probably watch Sky News and read The Australian. So horses for courses, it all comes out in the wash. But I love it when stories like this make it into the media, because every story that you hear of, whether it's a cartoonist, we know that the same was true for our now dearly departed Michael Leunig, lost his job because he dared to make these really hard-hitting and truthful, like this cartoon, very truthful. Bezos and others have donated millions of dollars to Trump and supported him in other ways. So this was a depiction simply of the absolute truth of who these guys are throwing their weight behind. But depending on the outlet, they say, no, we're not allowing this. And I love it when this makes it into the public sphere, because people need to be reminded, there's no supreme freedom of the press.
No.
Every single one of us is playing a game to some extent, and people just follow the ones that they like.
I just don't agree with her losing her job. I mean, I just think it's ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
That's what I don't agree with.
And good on her for going public about it.
Good on her. You have to speak up about these things in the end.